In the summer of 1485, England, weary from decades of civil war, was once again drawn to a decisive turning point. Richard III, the last king of the House of York, sought to tighten his grip on the throne through harsh measures. While in exile, a young Lancastrian claimant was making his return step by step. Henry Tudor. Henry had spent much of his childhood in Wales and later endured many years of exile in France. His claim to the throne did not come directly from the Lancastrian line. Rather, it was through his mother, Margaret Beaufort, that he possessed royal blood. Yet, despite this tenuous link, Henry had become the sole surviving hope of the Lancastrian cause. Charles VIII of France, successor to Louis XI, saw in Henry an opportunity to weaken England and offered him financial support. With a small but disciplined force of roughly 2,000 men, Henry sailed from France and landed on the Welsh coast on the 7th of August, 1485. At first glance, the venture seemed perilous. Richard held the crown, and his army was far larger than Henry's. But Henry's greatest advantage lay in the ground he set foot on. In Wales, he could draw upon old loyalties and deep-rooted ties. Local supporters and Lancastrian loyalists began to rally to his banner. More importantly, although they avoided open commitment, the powerful Stanley family signalled their sympathy for Henry. Thomas Stanley and his brother William commanded forces so large that they could tip the balance of the coming conflict. Henry's march was slow but steady. Advancing from Wales into the heart of England, his army swelled with each mile as more men joined his cause. He was no longer merely a prince in exile, but a genuine contender for the throne. Richard, watching these developments with growing alarm, acted swiftly. He gathered his army and positioned it near Leicester, securing the strategic heights around Bosworth. His forces numbered between 10,000 and 12,000 men, giving him a clear numerical advantage. Yet much of his host was made up of levies called unwillingly to arms, and his confidence rested uneasily on the loyalty of his allies. By his side stood the Duke of Norfolk and the Earl of Northumberland, stalwart supporters of the crown. Richard deployed his army in the traditional three-battle formation, the centre under his own command, with heavy cavalry beneath the royal standard. The right wing, commanded by the Duke of Norfolk, composed largely of infantry. The left wing, under the Earl of Northumberland, a powerful force capable of deciding the day. Richard's strategy was to crush Henry's smaller host with a swift and decisive blow. Henry, for his part, had gathered around 5,000 to 6,000 men during his march from Wales, far fewer than Richard's. His core strength lay in seasoned French mercenaries and skilled Welsh archers, supplemented by Lancastrian loyalists who had joined along the way. The key uncertainty lay with the Stanleys. Thomas and William Stanley arrived on the battlefield with nearly 6,000 men of their own. But at first they held back, committing to neither side. For Richard, the Stanleys' hesitation was deeply troubling. For Henry, it was a source of hope. As the morning mist lifted, the battle began. Richard's army charged downhill, using the advantage of the high ground. Norfolk's wing clashed fiercely with Henry's vanguard. The fighting was intense, but Henry's disciplined French soldiers and Welsh archers managed to withstand Richard's first assault. Northumberland's wing, however, scarcely moved. The reason remains debated to this day. Some historians argue that Northumberland deliberately held back, verging on treachery, while others suggest that the chaos of the battlefield prevented him from receiving clear orders. What is certain is that a significant portion of Richard's army never engaged. As the battle raged on, Richard spotted a weakness. Henry's position was guarded by only a thin ring of men. Believing he could decide the conflict in a single stroke, Richard made the choice later described as the most courageous yet the most desperate charge in English history. Leading a company of his household knights, Richard spurred his horse forward. His aim was simple: to kill or capture Henry and end the rebellion at once. At first, the charge achieved its purpose. Henry's standard-bearer, Sir William Brandon, was struck down and killed. Some of Henry's men broke under the ferocity of the king's attack, but at this critical moment, the Stanleys finally chose their side. William Stanley's forces surged forward, crashing into Richard's cavalry. Surrounded, Richard refused to retreat. Chroniclers tell us he fought bravely to the very end, his horse mired in a bog, striking blows as he tried desperately to reach Henry himself. But he was overwhelmed and slain in the struggle. Richard III thus became the last English king to die in battle. After the fight, his body was carried to Leicester, stripped naked, and displayed ignominiously on horseback before the townspeople. It was not only the tragic end of a king, but also the collapse of the House of York itself. On the battlefield, the victors hailed Henry as their new monarch. Legend has it that Richard's crown was retrieved from the ground and placed upon Henry's head. In that moment, the Tudor dynasty was born. Bosworth was more than a battle between two armies. It was the reckoning of two dynasties. Richard's bold but doomed charge entered legend, while the intervention of the Stanleys changed the course of the war and the future of England forever. The consequences were clear. The House of York was extinguished, and the Wars of the Roses came to their bloody conclusion. Henry Tudor was proclaimed King Henry VII, the first monarch of a new dynasty. Henry's greatest achievement came not through battle, but through politics. Soon after his coronation, he married Elizabeth of York, daughter of Edward IV, uniting the houses of Lancaster and York. This marriage symbolised the end of nearly half a century of civil strife. The red rose of Lancaster and the white rose of York were fused into the red and white Tudor rose. This union represented not just the birth of a new dynasty, but the dawn of a new England. The Tudors would build a strong central monarchy, restore stability, and guide the kingdom toward renewed prominence in Europe. History would forever remember Richard III as the last English king to fall on the battlefield, and Henry VII as the founder of the Tudor dynasty, the ruler who led England into a new era. And so we conclude, the Wars of the Roses were never merely a struggle for a crown. They were a crucible that reshaped the destiny of England itself. At Bosworth Field, with blood and steel, a new chapter began.